The trail started like any other packed earth beneath my boots, moonlight pressing silver through the pines, the distant ripple of a creek somewhere off the path. I'd come here for solitude, for the kind of quiet you can't buy in a city, the kind that swallows you whole and makes you feel like the last person alive. But as I crossed the mile marker, something shifted. The forest exhaled in a way that wasn't wind, it was too warm, too deliberate, like the kind of breath that fogs a window when something is leaning close. The air carried an edge of iron, subtle but growing, and a musk I couldn't place at first. Not wet dog, not bear, wilder, older. The night creatures were gone. No chirp, no flutter, no branch crackle. Silence stretched like taut wire. Humming in my skull, I thought of the old man at the bait shop in town. His rheumy eyes staring right through me when I mentioned where I planned to hike. He'd only said one thing before turning away: don't pass the unreturned mile. Now, standing there, I realized the ground beneath my feet had changed. Softer, looser, the pine needles held more moisture, and the air itself seemed heavier. The moon, which had been bright enough to map shadows before, now felt diluted, as if the canopy above had closed tighter without making a sound. A subtle sound reached me, not a footstep exactly, more like the slow parting of undergrowth, as if something tall was moving carefully to match my rhythm. I told myself it was deer, maybe elk, but the cadence was wrong. No tentative pause, no skitter. This was a steady, mirrored march. I moved faster, but the sound moved faster with me. I tried slowing to throw it off, but it slowed too. My own echo rendered in motion. The trail ahead narrowed, the trees on either side leaning in as though they'd grown to block something from leaving or entering. And though I hadn't seen it yet, I knew with the kind of primal certainty that erases all rational thought. I wasn't alone out here. Something had chosen me, and whatever it wasn't going to let me leave these woods the way I came in. The trail dipped, curling into a hollow where the moon's light thinned to nothing but a washed smear through the canopy. The silence pressed harder here, thick enough that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. That steady, urgent thud, like a countdown I hadn't agreed to start. Something moved ahead, not fast, not loud, just there and gone in the span of a blink. Too tall to be deer, too quick to be a man. The shape bent wrong at the middle, as if it carried itself with a spine, made for running on all fours, but had decided, for my benefit, to stand upright. I froze, and for a moment, so did the world. The air felt charged, sharp at the edges, as if each breath was shaving itself against my lungs. That's when the sound came, low, drawn out. Not a wolf's clean howl. This was deeper, a layered rumble that started in the chest and rolled out in waves, vibrating through the soil and into my bones. It wasn't a call to the pack, it was a statement, a warning, or worse, a claim. My instinct screamed for me to move, but the trail ahead now seemed narrower, hemmed in by trees whose roots bulged from the ground like coiled serpents. The moss here was wet, clinging to my boots in a way that stole seconds I couldn't afford. A flicker to my left, branches bowing as if something heavy had passed through without touching the ground. Then, another to my right, just out of sight. The movements were wrong in speed and placement, like watching lightning strike in two places at once. The smell intensified, copper and musk, undercut by a faint, bitter tang that stirred a memory I couldn't place. My skin prickled. Whatever this was, it wasn't simply following me, it was testing me, steering me. Every step forward felt like moving deeper into a design I hadn't seen on the map, and in that moment, I understood. The thing in the woods wasn't chasing me, it was arranging me. The first real sprint began without my consent. A branch cracked to my left, too sharp, too close, and I bolted. The forest reacted instantly. Trees became blurs, roots reached up like fingers, and the ground itself seemed to tilt beneath my boots. The air turned cold in my throat, each breath cutting like glass. Behind me, the sound was no longer careful. It was thunder footfalls that hit with such weight I could feel them through the soles of my boots, as if the earth wanted to buckle under each one. The rhythm was wrong for a man and far too heavy for any wolf I knew. It was faster than both. Something swept across the trail ahead, a blur of muscle and shadow. It didn't strike, it crossed, forcing me off the packed earth into a snarl of undergrowth. Thorns tore at my arms and face, ripping away my sense of direction. That's when I saw them. 2 points of molten gold hanging in the dark like a predator's lanterns. They didn't blink, didn't sway. They waited. I pushed forward, crashing through brush, the golden eyes vanishing only to reappear at a new angle, closer each time. It wasn't chasing me in a straight line. It was circling, folding the forest in on me like a trap snapping shut. A new sound joined the hunt, a low, rhythmic panting, wet and measured. So close I could almost feel the heat of it on my back. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, but the ground turned slick underfoot, a shallow marsh swallowing my boots to the ankle. The sucking sound of each step felt deafening, and I knew it was telling my pursuer exactly where I was, somewhere ahead. The trail widened again, spilling faint moonlight between the trees. It was a lifeline, a promise. I sprinted toward it, and the moment I reached the edge, something massive exploded from the right, a shadow and a snarl all at once. close enough that I felt the whip of its fur and the burn of its breath across my cheek. I didn't see claws, but I heard them ripping bark from a tree trunk as the thing skidded past. Circling again, the hunt had begun in earnest. The moonlight faded again, swallowed by branches that seemed to knit tighter overhead the deeper I ran. My boots found the trail only in fragments now, broken by stones, slick with moss and roots curling like the fingers of something buried but not dead. The sounds behind me changed. No longer the thunder of pursuit, this was slower, more deliberate. The cadence was almost playful. It wasn't losing me. It was letting me know it could lose me if it wanted to. I cut left, forcing my way through a tangle of young pines, and stumbled onto a line of trees carved with deep, parallel gouges. The marks were fresh. Sap still wept from the wounds, catching the moonlight like beads of oil. They were spaced wider than a bear's reach, higher than I could touch even if I jumped. The scent here was suffocating fur, musk, and the sharp tang of blood, but there was something else layered beneath. It's something faint and acrid, like burnt hair. As if the air itself had been scorched, the forest narrowed into a natural chute of rock and brush, and every instinct screamed to turn back. But behind me I heard it a single step, heavier than before placed, with the kind of confidence that says you've already lost. I pushed forward, my breath coming ragged, vision tunneling as the chute funneled me into a small clearing. That's when I saw it. Not the creature itself, but the aftermath of where it had been. Tufts, of course. Dark hair caught on bark, a half-eaten deer carcass dragged halfway into the brush. The kill was recent. The eyes on that deer were still wide, the body still warm. A sound rolled through the clearing, low, steady, almost a purr, but with an edge of metal in it, like claws dragging over stone. The vibration crawled up through my legs, tightening every muscle in my body. The thing wasn't just tracking me, it was moving me, steering me towards something it wanted me to see. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just its hunting ground, it was its arena. The chute ended without warning, dropping me into a gash in the earth no wider than a small cabin and twice as deep. The slope was steep and slick with loose stone, and by the time I found my footing, my only exit was the way I'd fallen in. Air down here was heavier, wet with the smell of rot that clung to the back of my tongue. Above, the pines swayed just enough to let shards of moonlight spill in, painting the rocks in fractured silver. A sound echoed off the walls, slow, deliberate, steps coming closer, not the crashing pursuit of before. This was the sound of something descending with absolute control. Each step a statement. I pressed back against the far wall, eyes scanning for anything that could be used as a weapon. My hand closed on a jagged length of branch, its end splintered, and slick with sap. Not much, but better than nothing. The shadow appeared first, stretching long across the stone, the shape of it alien yet sickeningly familiar. Broad shoulders that sloped into elongated arms, the silhouette of a head too large for a man yet too narrow for any wolf. Then it stepped into the light. Its fur was black where the moonlight didn't touch, but in the silver glow, the sheen revealed ripples of muscle shifting beneath. The face was a distorted fusion muzzle, elongated, nostrils flaring as it drew in my scent, eyes lit with the molten gold I'd seen in the trees. Claws flexed, scraping against stone with a sound like knives on wet glass. It didn't charge, it didn't roar, it simply stood there, head tilted as if listening to the rhythm of my breathing, testing me, measuring me. A gust of wind funneled down into the ravine, stirring the smell of copper and musk until it was all I could breathe. My grip tightened on the branch until my knuckles ached. Then, without warning, it moved one long, fluid step forward, the muscles in its legs bunching like a spring about to snap. I understood then that whatever I was about to do next, I'd only get to try it once. It moved first, a blur of black muscle and gold eyes, closing the gap in less than a heartbeat. I swung the branch up instinctively, the jagged end catching it across the muzzle with a crack of splintering wood. The impact barely slowed it, twisted its head enough for me to roll aside before those claws shredded the stone where I'd been standing. The sound it made wasn't a howl, it was a snarl wrapped around a growl, deep enough to rattle my teeth, vibrating up through the rock. Into my bones I felt it before I heard it. It lunged again. This time I didn't dodge, I stepped into it, driving the broken branch toward the hollow between its ribs. The wood punched in an inch, maybe two, before the werewolf's arm swept sideways, claws raking across my shoulder in a white-hot slash that sent me spinning into the wall. Pain narrowed the world to a tunnel. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp, my vision flecked with black. It closed in, moving low and fast, every line of its body promising the next move would be the last one I ever saw. Desperation burned the fear away. My free hand found a small emergency flare clipped to my pack. I yanked the cap, struck its sudden red light exploding between us. The creature reared back, a guttural roar ripping from its throat as the glare lit its face in savage detail. Scars crisscrossing its muzzle, saliva hanging in threads from its teeth, pupils narrowing to pinpoints in the flare's blaze. I drove forward, pressing the burning end into its chest. The smell of singed fur and scorched flesh filled the ravine, the werewolf's scream climbing into a pitch that made the air feel thinner. It swiped at me blindly, claws catching my side and tearing through fabric and skin. But I didn't stop until the flare sputtered in my hand. It staggered back, one massive hand pressing to the burn. For the first time, it looked unsure, not beaten, just reminded that prey can still bite. Blood was running hot down my side, my arm throbbing where the claws had opened me up, but I stayed. On my feet, my chest heaved, each breath tasting like metal. It stared at me for a long second, then it stepped backward, melting into the shadow at the edge of the moonlight until only those molten eyes were left. And then those two were gone. But the silence it left behind wasn't relief, it was a promise. I climbed out of the ravine like a man dragging himself out of his own grave. Every muscle screamed. My hand slipped on wet rock, reopening cuts I hadn't even felt in the fight. The forest above looked no friendlier than when I dropped to it, but the moon was sinking, and the first veins of dawn were threading pale blue through the branches. The silence followed me. No rustle of leaves, no bird song, just the soft patter of blood dripping from my side, each drop swallowed by the dirt. The trail was there again, narrow, winding, but real. My boots found it like they'd been starved for its packed certainty. Step by step, the trees thinned, the air lightened. By the time I saw the faint gleam of my truck's windshield through the brush, I could almost believe I'd made it. I didn't run, couldn't. Every step was deliberate. As if speed might trigger something still listening, my hand closed on the door handle, and for a moment I just stood there, head against the metal, letting the cold seep into my skin. That's when I saw them, in the strip of mud just before the gravel lot. There were tracks, fresh, deep, impossibly large. The claw tips had gouged the earth like chisels. They ran parallel to my own footprints, but not from behind, from the direction I'd been heading. I followed the line of them without meaning to. They cut across the lot, past my truck entirely, and continued toward the tree line behind it, the side that led straight to the road. I'd take home. The wind shifted then, just enough to carry a smell I knew too well now. Musk, copper, and something burnt. The forest was waking. A single crow called somewhere in the distance. I opened the truck door, slid inside, and turned the key. The engine's roar too loud, too fragile. I didn't look in the mirrors, didn't check the back seat. As I pulled away, the tree line receded in the rear view, swallowed in morning haze, but over the rumble of the tires, I swear I heard it, low, distant, and rising. A howl, too deep for any wolf, rolling down the hills like it had already chosen the place where it would catch me next. Some hunts don't end when you leave the woods, and for those who hunger for more, to step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlists linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.